Finally, the sales season is here and you've been waiting for this to upgrade your laptop. And every store, every website, and every ad is just screaming best laptop deals ever. And let me guess, you probably watched a bunch of videos comparing benchmarks, frame rates, Cinebench scores, all the usual stuff. But here's the thing, those tests don't always paint the full picture. They don't tell you the full story. Two laptops with the exact same hardware can perform completely differently, often without much explanation why. And many of the real factors that can make or break your experience either never gets mentioned or just gets overlooked. So, in this video, I want to change that. I'm Arya, this is AZM Lab, and today I'm going to give you the ultimate laptops buyer's guide for 2025. Something that's not just about the performance numbers, but the real world details that directly impact your experience over time. My goal is simple: help you buy smarter, save money, and get a laptop that truly lasts. Now, when it comes to buying a laptop, some of the biggest things that people tend to overlook are repairability, maintenance, and just general build quality. And let me tell you, from my own experience and from watching so many of my favorite creators, such as Salon Experts and so on, and their teardown videos, I am constantly reminded of one simple truth. A laptop is only as good as how easy it is to fix when something eventually goes wrong, and they always do. But unlike PCs, laptop parts are custom shaped. They are tightly packed and are far more delicate. And with how expensive laptops are these days, this should be an investment that would at least, and I'm talking about at least, last you about 2 to 3 years at a minimum. So, the first thing I would say to always pay attention to is the build quality. Even top brands, guys, have models with weak spots. Some laptops look premium on the outside with metal chassis and all that, but then they actually cut corners when it matters, especially hinges. Oh my god, I have seen countless people dealing with hinge cracks, outright hinge separations, just because the parts were just glued into the frame. It's ridiculous. It drives me up the wall. But what I would say is a good rule of thumb is check user feedbacks on the likes of Reddit and forums and so on. And when you're testing a laptop, look for a wobble when, especially when you're typing, on the screen and so on. Ideally, what you're looking for are hinges that should feel solid and are built into the chassis, not just attached as like an afterthought. You will see them kind of lifted from the body a little bit. Now, another warning sign, guys, is excessive flex in the body or the lid. Laptops with weak internal support are more prone to bend motherboards or damaged connectors over time. And let me tell you guys, if a laptop motherboard fails, in most cases, the entire device is done. Also, don't assume metal equals better, because metal conducts heat. So those laptops that can feel noticeably hotter tends to be the ones that are made out of metal. So remember, what matters more than the material is how well it's actually built. And some of the plastic ones are far, far better than some of the metal ones. And then there's also the maintenance and repairability itself. And here's some of the things I would say always keep in mind. First of all, warranty, guys. Some brands will void your warranty the moment you open the laptop or upgrade parts because they want you to pay them the exuberant fees to send the laptop to them to repair it. I would say always try to stay away from them. Now, also remember, if you have to send it off for repair to them, what is their turnaround time? Do they have a local support for your area, Or does it take months for it to be sent to China or somewhere to get repaired? Again, that's a huge problem. Another one is accessibility. Can you easily open up your laptop to repair it? Is the motherboard flipped? And what I mean by that is when you open up the laptop, can you see all the parts and access them, clean them and everything? Because if the motherboard is the other way around towards the keyboard, let me tell you, it's not an easy job to do. Even if you send it to a professional, they would charge you an arm and a leg. Additionally, going on that, guys, when it comes to cleaning, replacing the paste and all that side of things, guys, it is important to look how easy it is and try to stay away from liquid metal where you can, because they are a nightmare to fix. And finally, guys, this is very important. Make sure you check how easy it is to get genuine parts like batteries, especially screen and other components in your region. And for how many years? Let me tell you, if the screen dies and you cannot source a replacement, that laptop becomes an e-waste overnight. That goes from other parts as well. Again, with batteries, guys, it will be a nightmare to go get hold of a decent one. So for me, the key is always this: check real user experience. Look at Reddit, long-term reviews and repair discussions, not just how the laptop is performing on day one, but what it's like after like a year of use. That's where the truth always shows. Continuing on from maintenance, another big one is upgradability. And the more upgrade friendly a laptop is, the longer it stays useful, because you can upgrade it so you can still maintain a good enough performance. And yes, framework laptops are basically kings of this. And if you can afford one, guys, no matter what, I cannot recommend them enough. They're incredible, but they're not the cheapest or the right fit for everyone. So it's important to know what you can and can't upgrade in most modern machines. Unfortunately, CPUs and GPUs are no longer upgradable. And for those that think that's always been the case, no. Back in the day, you could upgrade laptops as well. But obviously they weren't as profitable, so nowadays companies solder them directly onto the motherboard in almost every model. And that means the only component you can realistically upgrade later are RAM and storage, which is why they really matter in terms of maintaining that high performance. Now, when it comes to RAM, guys, if a RAM is soldered, that means it's directly attached to the motherboard, you're locked in to whatever configuration you buy on day one. No future upgrades, no flexibilities, and that often forces you to spend a lot more just to get enough memory. Ridiculous. So I will always recommend, guys, look for a system that allows you to upgrade. Again, the warranty also allows you to do it personally, because what I would give you as a tip is always go for the lowest RAM option, because what manufacturers tend to do is they buy the cheapest RAMs out there, but they would charge you premium, almost double the cost of the highest versions. So always go for the lowest model and then upgrade it yourself. Now, when it comes to storage, guys, in 2025, I will always recommend look for at least 2 internal M.2 NVMe slot. That will give you a real room to expand, because external SSDs are fine for backups or temporary work, but they are slower, more expensive per terabyte, and nowhere near as convenient as internal storage, and nowhere near as fast. So giving yourself a bit more flexibility, a bit more room to upgrade and add more memory, always a top choice, guys. Now, when it comes to screens, tying this kind of directly back to the repairability element a little bit, there are some amazing options out there, especially with premium laptops with OLED panels looking incredible, deep blacks, insane contrast, and colors that will really pop. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize: OLED isn't perfect. Over time, OLED panels can develop what's called burning, which is like a static image, or that looks like kind of like a shadow left on a screen. Very annoying. And because laptops are used for such a mixed range of tasks such as editing, office work, and so on, as well as gaming, there's gonna be a lot of static UI elements. Especially when it comes to bright menus, the risk is a lot, and I mean a lot higher. And this is where things get complicated, especially because with Silent Expert doing this whole breakdown on Razer laptops and showing how difficult some manufacturers make the whole process of screen replacement, even for repair shops, this becomes even more important because before you get blown away by how good OLED looks, think about how you actually plan to use it. And bear in mind, the likelihood of having a problem with OLED is not only higher, but they actually cost quite a lot to replace as well. So even if the process was simple, you got that issue to bear in mind as well. So in my opinion, if you want a premium look with a fewer long-term risks, mini LED is probably a safe middle ground. You get high brightness, strong HDR, and a great contrast, but with a less risk. Again though, let me repeat guys, OLED is fantastic, but if you're planning to go down that route, make sure you look after it, make sure you understand the warranty, going back to what I mentioned earlier. And to be fair guys, honestly, modern IPS panels have come a long way. They're more than reliable and honestly easier to replace as well, and usually far cheaper in terms of the cost if it comes down to it. But they still will give you a great quality, which is the main thing. And while we are on subject of the screens, guys, here are two things that I would say are also worth checking. If you work long hours, look for something that's flicker-free or DC dimming displays. They do make a noticeable difference in terms of eye strains, especially if you're using it for office jobs and that sort of thing. And if you're using your laptop in bright rooms or outdoors, try, and I mean make sure actually, to get something with at least 500 nits of brightness. Anything lower, and trust me, you'll be spending more time chasing shadows or dark spots just to read the screen. Now, one area that still somehow managed to surprise me in 2025 is connectivity. You would think by now there will be some form of clear baseline standard, right? Well, sadly there isn't, because some laptops still ship with USB 2.0 ports, and that's not just disappointing, it is a real limitation. Now, you might be wondering why this matters so much. Well, let's put it this way. If you're using a high-speed external drive, 4K capture cards, or connecting an external display, or anything that uses lots of data, those older ports can completely bottleneck your setup. You could have an incredibly fast system, but your monitor might look terrible. Your camera might freeze, or you might not even get a stable 4K signal at all. Simply because, well, the port can't keep up. What you really want are USB 3.2 Gen 2, and if you're going premium, Thunderbolt 4 or USB 4. These offer much faster data transfer, support external GPUs, which are essentially these casings where you can install PC GPUs in, and if one of the USB-Cs or Thunderbolts allows you to power up your laptop, awesome. And if it's directly connected to your GPU, even better, because what that would allow you to do is a one cable setup where it's not only powers your laptop, it connects to external displays to give you that very clean look, but at the same time, still gets you proper HDR, high refresh rate. So essentially full performance, but with a very, very clean setup, which, well, if you got some form of office work or gaming setup, that's what you really want. If those options in terms of display is not necessarily available, then what you really want for an external display is full-size DisplayPort or a fast HDMI port. Mini DisplayPorts or slower HDMI versions can limit HDR support and restrict refresh rate. And again, if that USB-C option is not connected to your GPU directly, that can also give you some compatibility issues and other problems and so on. So again, those are the things that you need to look for. Also, as a bit of an extra, when it comes to Ethernet ports or SD card readers, don't stress too much about these. They are convenient, but they're easy to add with adapters. What you really want in terms of future-proofing your setup is having a modern setup that gives you high-speed ports with strong power delivery. Now, another big topic that rarely ever gets talked about is battery performance. And when it comes to most reviews, they tend to test the laptops while they're plugged in, which is fine for benchmarks, but that doesn't actually reflect on how most people use their laptops. The whole point of a laptop is the flexibility that you can take them wherever you go, whether you want to use them while traveling, whether you want to use them on bed. But here's the thing. Once you unplug your laptop, most systems throttle your CPU and GPU power by 50 to 70% to save energy and manage heat. And this is important because this will have a huge, and I mean huge, impact on the general performance. So if you plan to edit, game, or render on the go, that's something that you really need to know. So always look for reviews that compare plugged in versus battery performance, and check if the laptop offers some form of a hybrid GPU mode or echo profiles that balances the power intelligently. So when you're away from your charger, you can get a little bit more juice, or again, potentially a few more minutes. Now, it is also worth checking the battery capacity, usually listed in some form of watts per hour in the specification. That's the real indicator of the runtime, beyond the marketing claims that sometimes get slapped on, which, let's just say, they're a little bit overblown, to say the least. And guys, this is the most important thing. Since batteries naturally degrade over time, make sure, and I cannot emphasize this enough, make sure replacements are easy to find and install. Some brands continue selling official batteries for years. Others stop soon after launch, and that can be a huge problem because no matter how premium a laptop is, you will eventually need to replace its battery. Finally, if your laptop supports USB-C or PD 3.1 fast charging, that's a huge plus because it means you can actually travel lighter and use a compact GAN charger instead of carrying a heavy power brick. In short, don't just look at the battery life on day one, but look at how the laptop generally performs and ages when it's running on its own power. Now, let's talk about power and cooling. Two things that don't get nearly as much attention as they should, even though they have one of the biggest impacts on real-world performance. And you probably came across it to some capacity. You might have seen some laptops with exactly the same specs, let's just say a premium model, like an RTX 5090 paired with an Intel Ultra 9. Amazing, right? Yet one of them performs noticeably worse than the other, even though they both are plugged in. Now, you might be wondering why, right? Well, the reason almost always comes down to power delivery and cooling design, especially when it comes to thin laptops. They usually have tighter thermals, smaller fans, so manufacturers basically lower the voltage to keep the temperature under control. And the problem is that basically means you'll be paying for the top tier GPU and only get mid-tier performance because, well, the system simply can't give it enough juice and can't keep it cool enough. And this is why it is so important to check the TGP or total graphics power and the overall wattage limits in reviews. A well-cooled, thicker RTX 5080 laptop can easily outperform a thin RTX 5090 model that's constantly throttling or just basically not getting enough power. And this also matters when you already have set your mind on a model for a system and you just simply selecting the internal specs of that laptop. what you want to look for, again, is make sure the cooling system and the power delivery is enough to support the higher end chips. Otherwise, you'll be potentially paying extra 200, 400, even more, and you might only get a tiny performance boost or none at all. So, in another word, don't just look at the GPU tier, look at the cooling and the power behind it. That's what determines how a laptop performs every single day for you. Now, another important factor you should always consider when buying a new laptop are its built-in features and knowing exactly what matters for you. Honestly, it is so easy to get caught up with all the marketing, buzzwords, tags, and all the rest. But before buying, guys, make sure you think about how you're going to use it, where you're going to use it. Say, for example, if you're a gamer, no matter how good the trackpad is, it will not cut it. You probably will end up needing to buy a proper mouse or using, like, say, an Xbox controller. The same goes for speakers. Most laptops, no matter how good they are, they will still sound a bit tinny and lacking a bit of a bass, and that's due to the limitation of the size. And especially if they're powerful, they're going to get drowned out by fans. And well, that's not a bad thing. I'd much rather have a powerful system that cooled properly than a quiet one that's just going to massively underperform. And because of that, most people will tend to end up using headphones or maybe buy like an external Bluetooth speaker or something. So again, don't let those audio brandings be a deal breaker. Another big one for me is I always recommend using a laptop riser or a cooling pad that will improve the airflow and keeps the temps down for your laptop. So it allows the laptop to kind of cool down, and that helps with the longevity in terms of a healthier laptop and just general maintenance, which means when it comes to keyboard, because it's going to sit at an angle, it's not going to be comfortable to type on. So you probably will end up buying an external one. So that is something to consider when you're judging a laptop based on its keyboard. But if you have to or want to get a really good keyboard, just remember, make sure you consider how it's going to be used. So what I mean by that is even the, like, say, a quiet mechanical ones, they're still pretty loud, especially if you're going to be using a meeting or a classroom. Nobody likes the sound of typing all the time. But one area that I would say always deserves big attention to, especially because of all the remote working and how things are going these days, are webcams, and they always get overlooked. Many laptops these days still ship with basic 720p cameras and very weak audios, which are very disappointing. So if you're going to take calls or work remotely, look for like a 1080p webcam with some form of AI noise reduction, and not just marketing bias, but I mean for like something that really gives you the clarity and reliability that you can really see from some form of demonstrations. And since you can still buy an external ones, trust me when I say this, many of them struggle to sit on top of the laptop and they kind of bend down, bend the screen backwards. So don't really rely on that elements at all. So the takeaway is simple, guys. Focus on what actually your laptop is going to be used for. Paint a, shall we say, a picture of where the scenarios is going to be and how it's going to be used, and take those into consideration. And don't let those marketing and all the big shiny tags really be a deal breaker for you. Finally, don't forget, software is just as important as hardware. A laptop can be perfect on paper, but feels awful, and I mean awful, if the software is buggy or limits what you can do with it. Some brands provide regular BIOS and driver updates that fixes throttling and generally improve stability, or even boost performance months later, while others, well, let's just say they abandon their models after a year. So before you buy, always check real user feedback on Reddit or forums to see how the brand actually handles these sort of updates and general support other than the warranty. Also, take a look at the control software the laptops rely on, because you cannot always use third-party software, especially when it comes to laptops. Tools like Lenovo Vantage, MSI Center, or Armoury Crate can be useful for adjusting fan curves, power limits, hybrid mode, or even undervolting. But not every brand gives you that freedom. Some lock down advanced BIOS options completely without providing any particular options, and you're even locked out of third-party ones. So, which can be frustrating and a deal breaker, especially if you want control over the performance or thermals. Another thing to keep in mind is bloatware. Some manufacturers load their laptops with so many background services, telemetries, and extra AI or RGB apps that drains your battery. Frustrating, trust me, they are horrendous, and they sometimes affect the performance. They increase heat because they just run too many things at once. And depending on the laptop, you may also be forced to use some from an OEM specific GPU or chipset drivers instead of official NVIDIA and AMD or even Intel ones. They are very rare, but still look out for those, which means essentially slower updates and potential bugs in newer games. Again, something to definitely bear in mind. Finally, guys, check the basics. Does a laptop offer a proper GPU mode, switch, or a MUX, or pair app GPU control? Stuff that gives you a little bit more general control in terms of the performance of the laptop, or hybrid eco mode that I mentioned earlier. They actually works and they have big impacts. So, and again, does the brand provide decent recovery or restore tools in case something, well, goes wrong? These small software details can make a huge difference in terms of how stable your laptop feels, and not something that you kind of constantly having to deal with problems with, but years later you can rely on and still get updates for, and well, get a good performance out of. I hope this video has helped, and if it has, don't forget, as always, to smash that like button. And no matter what, guys, drop your comments down below. Love to hear them, whether you think that I might have missed something, or even if you have a question around the laptop that you might be looking for, ask them away, guys. Even if it's something completely unrelated and you want to ask, please do ask them. You never know, it might be a subject I'll cover on the next video. And for that and a lot more on free tools, tech talks, streaming guides, and so much more, hit that notification and hit that subscribe button. And until next time, guys, take care and peace.